tell if he started or not.
I'm here.
Good. Thank you.
You should see my screen.
I had the volume off for a while. I see your screen now and you're all set.
Okay. Should we start then?
Whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you. Let's see here. Just 1 second, and we're going to be ready to go. There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's Robert Slawinski from DNA Explorers. We are on our next presentation. It is called Navigating Autosomal DNA Results and Contacting Matches. And so far, we've learned a bunch of information if you've tuned into the last couple presentations. And let's go and keep going on this train and see where it takes us. There we go. Okay, back to if you've seen this before, you're very familiar with what this looks like. It is a family tree of sorts that shows the father's line, mother's line, and basically the autosomal line or the cousin's line. So what lineages are followed with the autosomal DNA? All those that go into making you, essentially, all branches of those that are genetically directly related to you. Okay, we're going to be looking at a couple of different testing companies regarding autosomal results with matching, including Ancestry DNA, Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, MyHeritage, and Living DNA. Let's take a look at how these companies stack up and a little bit about interpretation of autosomal results. So Ancestry DNA provides you with ethnicity estimate, but also your DNA matches because what they use is your autosomal DNA to determine your connection to others in their DNA database. Now, these are my matches. Many people will have at least third or fourth cousin, some with extensive amount of heritage within the United States will have a lot of family members, first cousins that have tested. Now, these are only people that have tested as well. So looking at it this way, you have to compare potentially who you know that has come up on your match list, but you also have to look at a couple of different things. There is the, oh, hold on, let me get my laser pointer here. Each person will be provided an identification as far as whether they are second or third cousin, and they will also be giving you a indication of how many centimorgans. It's the small c, capital M. A centimorgan is the amount of DNA that is as a measurement of DNA. And then this gives you an idea that 261 centimorgans across 11 segments you share in common with that person. They also give an indication whether or not they have a tree. And this is one of the very few websites where they'll have that tree information at an easily recognizable location. Family Tree DNA has the same thing too, but it's not necessarily easily identifiable on the page. In this case, I have second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin, and the list goes down to like distant cousins and things like that. So, but what's interesting is that it will give you the amount of centimorgans of DNA that you share, how many segments you share with that person. But literally in Ancestry DNA, that information is nice to know, but there's very little you can do with it as far as the shared segments. But I know that in like family tree DNA, you can do a lot more with it, and we'll cover that as well. So it'll give you an idea if these people have a tree or not. Now, if a tree with 14 people, it's not going to give you that much information unless you have very closely related relatives. You definitely want a tree that has a lot more people on it to see if you can break through a brick wall on that. But the idea is that with your results on Ancestry is that you go through almost everyone, even further back. Now, if your tree goes back to the 1700s, you have a really good chance of connecting with someone that is in that fourth sixth cousin ratio or area. It'll make it a lot easier to be able to do that. But if your tree is relatively short, it's going to be you'll have to do a lot more research on your end, and then just keep on plugging away as best you can. And make sure that you have your tree available for people to look at least, if you can privatize some of it, but make sure that, for the relatives that, that are you're not worried so much about that have passed, then you should have something available for other people to look at. And then you can compare yours to theirs as well. Okay. Connecting to matches on Ancestry DNA. It's a good website to connect with relatives. It allows you to search family trees for in-common surnames. It allows the search information on specific people on a tree and determine if they are a relative or not. You still have to contact that person just to verify. A subscription is needed for full tree access. So you pay for your Ancestry DNA test. You don't have an Ancestry.com subscription, you will get access to certain numbers or certain things on Ancestry DNA. But if you start wanting to wander into the tree section of Ancestry, you're going to need a full subscription, or at least a partial subscription of some sort to get full tree access. There's different levels of subscription at Ancestry. So family tree DNA. They have an autosomal section too that we'll look at. It's called Family Finder. Now the Family Finder results has a whole bunch of different things that they've added onto it. Some more genealogically friendly than others. They'll have My Family Tree, which is basically something you add onto your page. You can directly upload a GEDCOM file, or you can build a tree from scratch. I'm sure many people are just horrified running out of the room thinking about that. The idea is that if you build a family tree or upload a GEDCOM, the most relevant people in your tree that are directly genetically tied to you are the surnames you should put in your profile. There are matches you get. These are DNA matches with relationship estimate. There's a chromosome browser. Now I'll talk about the chromosome browser in a second, but it is a visual comparison of DNA from one person to another. And sometimes you can look at multiple people to see. And when you look at multiple people, there's a chance you might be able to see that there is a common set of or centimorgans of DNA blocks that look like they may have come from a specific area or person. They have an option for linked relationships. You can basically confirm a relationship with someone else that will be a relative, and that's in this little small section, a different section. They give you My Origins, that's the ethnicity estimate that I presented earlier, and they have a thing called Ancient Origins, an estimate of major ancient groups. So Family Finder matches essentially. These tables don't look very extravagant or anything like that. They're very simple, and basically they're allow you to not be overwhelmed with the amount of information that can come from them. Now, some people have more information than others, and I'll get my cursor back up here again. I think I just lost it. There we go. They'll be basically, if a person is provided a photograph, it'll be on the side. Otherwise, it'll be whether it's a male or female. Basically, have probably names as well, and give you an idea that you can either email them, write a note, or if it's in blue, it'll be a family tree that's already uploaded onto their page. If it's in gray, they don't have one. It gives the date that you were matched, essentially. It'll give a relationship range, whether second or third cousin. It'll give you the amount of shared centimorgans. This is the amount of DNA that you share with that person. The higher the amount, the closer the relationship. The lower the amount, the further distant the relationship is. And it'll give you an idea about whether or not you have what the longest block is of centimorgans that's connected. So it's a large chunk versus a tiny bit that's been given to you. When DNA replicates, and then there's a chance where you have two sets of DNA, mother and father get together at that point, things are kind of shuffled around, and it's broken up in chunks when the DNA is reforming. So what happens before when these two bits of DNA get together, you'll basically get a certain amount from your relative, your father, and from your mother, and there'll be certain amounts from your relatives on either side. And usually are blocks now, and so you don't always get the same amount from each relative further back, but so you can compare that to each other when you do a comparison. I'll show you a little bit later. You can link that relationship, and if that person has put down their ancestral surnames and their profile page on the Family Finder for Family Tree DNA, you will see a list of those right there. However, if you have a surname matched to someone else on that list, it will come out in bold. What helps is if you have a good surname list, and that's not every surname on every part of your tree, it's based on the fact that you have put in surnames that are specifically directly related to you genetically. That means start with your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Don't start getting some other cousin that's related to them, their surnames in there, because they may not be fruitful. I'll cover that in a couple minutes as well. But this allows you to scroll. The plus sign is to basically click on that, and you'll get the full list of surnames to look at as well when you're looking at your Family Finder results. Those people who have tested both sides of their family and noted that can recognize whether it's a paternal match or a maternal match, or both on that. It allows you also to go to chromosome finder from there when you click on someone. I'm going to give you an example of a success story I did for a client. I was researching for a Martin family, and the gentleman, Mr. Martin, wanted to find out, he wanted to get some more information about, and the family did, about any other Martins that might be related to them. So the first step essentially is try to find someone who's related in Family Finder and has a Martin surname as well. But here's the thing, keep an open mind when doing DNA testing and looking at results. You may have let's say, a quest to find out that certain specific someone. Go into DNA test results with an open mind that you might find someone else that's in your family line. Don't forget about your quest, but essentially keep an open mind just in case something else pops up that you didn't know about. So at this point, I'm looking for Martin surnames in Family Finder. And I'm not finding very many, but what this allowed me to do is compare the segments of DNA across the 23 chromosomes. And this foreground image right here is a blow up of this over here so you can see a little bit better. That I'm comparing 4 people to Mr. Martin and finding essentially that there are some essentially that have a commonality on 2 of the chromosomes right here. And that kind of gives you a visual to see the shared blocks of DNA between these people. So they're related in some way, but there are different amounts of DNA associated with the chromosomes over here. And that can be used later on when you have enough family members that have tested to kind of attribute where blocks of DNA have come from specific ancestors. And there have been some genetic genealogists that have specialized in something like this as well. But this gives you an idea that when you can compare not only one person, but up to 4 or 5 people to determine where you share blocks of DNA or the centimorgans of DNA, and to get an idea of how closely 2 people might be related. So researching for Mr. Martin, I had many matches with the Martin surname using Family Finder. Only surname used in search for autosomal matches and Mr. Martin. So I changed their approach and added as many direct and relevant surnames in Mr. Martin's tree to the search. Now, the surnames that were in the profile of Mr. Martin were all the surnames in the family tree. It was a giant GEDCOM. And so I had basically now reduced that to the number of relevant surnames, which means that they're genetically related to Mr. Martin in that family tree and not including surnames outside of that, and reran the match algorithm and came up with 2 matches with a common surname of Brackbill. So not able to find something specifically around the Martin surname, but found something with a different surname to try to confirm some matches with people who are matches to see if we can find someone on a family tree that is directly related to them by looking and having specifically the right surnames to check this out. So Linda and Raymond Martin had a shared ancestor of Francis Brackbill that was born in 1705, died in 1756, married to John Herr. And essentially both Linda and Raymond shared this common ancestor. This confirms where their common ancestor is. And so we looked at that. So we have John Herr, Francis, and and their daughter's Elizabeth. They share the same daughter at that point. But what happened is that there is a change from Martin Barr and Elizabeth to Mary Barr. And so from Martin Barr and Elizabeth Barr to Anna Barr. So basically the split happened at this point where the sister of the daughter basically of Mary and Anna, the daughters Elizabeth, they split up, and that's where the split came in their family. So now it's connected back with a set of ancestors up here to connect them together. And that's not the only one. There was another one that came up too. So that it was even tighter relationship back to Francis Brackbill and John Herr. And so we're using autosomal DNA and the family trees to get a hit on what the relationship is between the two and where the connection is. They have shared ancestors with John Herr and Francis Brackbill for Pat and Raymond. Now, Pat is not a Martin. So let me see here. Hey, researching for Mr. Martin, lessons learned. Do not limit your search to one surname. Insert all direct lineage surnames in tree. Check all surname results. All the surname results that you get essentially for the hits. Now, the reason I was able to check Brackbill out is because when I reran the algorithm, remember on the right-hand side, it had a list of all the surnames. Well, the ones that were in bold are the ones that cross-reference each other. So those are the ones you should check to see, because those are the ones on your family tree that you can put in there, and then look up on their family, their family tree within family tree DNA. You can do a search on that surname, and then it'll give you a list, a drop-down list of all the people that have that surname within the family tree. And so you have to go and do some searching to see where the commonality is between the two family trees. Check all matches and even fifth and distant cousins. You never know what you might be able to find. This is almost mostly relevant when you have a very well documented and well back in time tree, so that essentially you have a higher chance of getting a match and confirming that match with a common ancestor. I have another family finder story here. Kerr family tree was created by DNA explorers and Julie Clausen, who is part of Search and Genealogy Services over in Southern Illinois. Mr. Kerr was interested in getting more information because his family tree had some brick walls. And the goal of that project was to find a specific Kerr surnamed ancestor. And expanded the family tree to cover other branches. Now, Julie Clausen was able to help with some of the genealogical services. And after I got a certain distance along on the family tree, because she's in Southern Illinois and Mr. Kerr's family is originally from Southern Illinois, then she was able to do some research locally. Was able to gather that information more quickly than I was able to. And then work together to provide some insight in expanding Mr. Kerr's family tree. So there was a specific Kerr ancestor Mr. Kerr was looking for, but we had difficulty finding records for that ancestor. The ancestor was born in Tennessee, but there are no records going back before then. And then it was very difficult to do that. And I was informed by Julie that the records in Tennessee are a little bit spotty, but you definitely have to go to Tennessee to dig through the records to see if you can get any more. She was unable to get anything locally there, but at that point, we kind of reached a dead end for that specific Kerr ancestor. Now, his family tree was expanded quite a bit by both of our research efforts on that. But since it was a paternal test that he was done, the Y DNA test, to specifically look for Kerr ancestors, because he wanted to find out whether the Kerr name was either Irish or Scottish, thinking that essentially probably was Scottish, with some other matches that we had found on the Y DNA or paternal side. I recommended doing an autosomal test to search for Kerr ancestors on a potential relative tree. So let's see if we can do it and go around the trees and matches to see if we can parse out another Kerr ancestor that might lead us back to what he's looking for. But no Kerr relatives were found on Family Finder. Another thing, so every time you think you've stepped ahead, there's another step back you have to take. But that did not stop us at this point. So after a while, a Family Finder match contacted me and linked someone in the Kerr family tree as a relationship. And common relative was great-grandmother Edna Conley. Edna Conley is over there, married to John Alfred Kerr. Now, the person that Mr. Kerr was looking for was further back in the family tree, and that we're still searching for that information. But finding that there was a common person who had shared ancestry with Edna Conley was very exciting at the same time, too. We get to add more to the family tree to expand it a little bit, because that person had a decent-sized family tree. Well, I looked at the family tree and started going back, and I was like, okay, this branch appeared to be well developed. It was going break into the 1700s, because at this point, when Mr. Kerr's tree, it was in the 1800s or early 1800s that we were able to get back to, which really isn't that far. But this is relevation allowed us to go further back into the 1700s. But I kept on going back in that tree as a connection to see where and how far it would go. So I kept looking and going further down and back into time. And I followed the line, and I kept going back, early 1700s. And I kept on going back into the 1600s. And the line kept on going back into the 1500s and ended up basically in the late 1400s, which I thought was just amazing to get a connection like that. And you always hope for more, but I thought at this point, the common line that went further back in there was very well documented, and that line went back to England and not Scotland. So, but it is kind of this, every once in a while, you will get someone trying to contact you that may have a heavily researched tree that'll be helpful. That is something that we all hope and want to happen. In this case, I was able to help out my client to do that. Let's see, hold on one second here. Okay. Okay. Connecting to matches on family tree DNA. It's a good website to connect with relatives. Number of people that are on family tree DNA do want to connect with relatives and find out more about that. Again, sometimes it's not going to be easy. Search for family tree information for uncommon surnames. Search information on specific people on the tree, and determine if they're relatives. So, but there's no subscription for full tree access on family tree DNA. But here comes the conundrum. Essentially, I've tested with Ancestry, or I've tested with 23andMe, or I've tested with family tree DNA. The thing is that eventually, if you're really into this and you want to use this as a tool, most likely I would recommend, and I've done so, is to test with the major 3 companies. And the reason I say that is because each of them has their own database of people that have tested. And there are a number of people that have cross-tested between 2 different companies, or they've taken the raw data and added it to, let's say, from Ancestry to family tree DNA. Is there a better one than other ones? The only reason one might be better is because one might have a better or a larger tree selection if those people have linked their tree to their DNA results or have posted the tree at all. There's so many people that have tested with autosomal DNA that don't have trees that you may wish to connect with them anyway to find out if they just have not had time to connect a tree to or link a tree to their site, to their page. But for family tree DNA, there's no subscription for full tree access if there is a full tree available for that match. I'm going here pretty quickly here. Okay, 23andMe, that is another company that does autosomal matching. Well, currently according to them, my DNA family has 964 relatives. So where do I start? And anytime there's a complicated matter about research, and an overwhelming number of people to research, essentially the euphemism is basically, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So looking at DNA relatives from 23andMe, I've got third to fourth cousins on there, and they provide some information about name, whether or not they're sharing their DNA. Now, in 23andMe, you can share your ancestry results, and if you've taken the health tests as well, you could share those if you wanted to, especially if you have a good relationship with that relative that wants to know more about family potential health issues. But we don't cover the health issue part on these ancestry presentations. You have some things that you can add on here about ancestor birthplaces and add surnames. This is kind of a private section you can add information to. And then you can do comparisons between two people or more. But they don't have access to family trees. You have to basically email that person and contact them and let them know you'd like to share some information regarding family trees. So I had a predicted relationship of a second cousin, and I thought that they were a first cousin, and this is actually a half cousin of mine. So he would be my half uncle's son, and we share a set of we actually share a set of grandparents. But I was looking at that, and in 23andMe, he came up both originally as a second cousin, and then I checked later on, and I changed the relationship to first cousin. So occasionally they haven't. When you get the results back, it does change a little bit if the algorithm looks at it again. Here's a story. This is a fall story. I had a 23andMe patron contact me who was my match, and basically said that we probably agree we were fourth cousins based on the 0.27% of the DNA that we shared. Now, sometimes they don't say things in centimorgans, they send these percentages. I actually prefer centimorgans because it kind of gives you a better idea what's going on. So Marilyn Terrell contacted me and said, we have a common ancestor somewhere. Let's see if we can find it. And I am like, sure, primarily because the location where she says she has an ancestor is in Ethnicity, Poland, and that is where I have living relatives. And so I was very excited to see that, there's a chance that I might be able to find some lost relatives. You know what happens with wars and like changes of political boundaries? People get split up and moved around, and then they never get in contact with each other. This is an opportunity to try to find a lost relative. I got excited. So Marilyn talks about her family tree, and then we're basically following the father's side, because the mother's side, this is not a Polish surname. Going on the Polish surname side, which basically started out with just FAL, and it was changed to FALL, probably to avoid some confusion. And I'm thinking, okay, great. There's a Michael Fall and a Magdalena Fall that were from Ethnicity, Poland. And I was all excited about that. And so I went and contacted my cousin, Anna. And I said, Anna, in Poland in Izdebki, is there a chance that we have, are there any falls in the town of Izdebki? I'm just waiting with bated breath, and I'm listening to her while she's talking about some things about family. And she says no. I'm like, how can you definitively say that? Well, it's a small enough town. She runs a family store over there, and she goes, nope, there's no falls over there. I'm like, okay, well, then are you sure? She goes, nope, Robert, there's no one named by the name of Fall in this town. So I think at that point that the people that used to live there have moved since that time frame. And I may have to check some other possibilities with that. But we do know from our genetics that we are tied, and because we share an ancestral village, that there's a good possibility that we may find someone in that area that may be related, and hopefully we'll be able to get that common ancestor come to fruition. Okay, so connecting the matches on 23andMe. It's a fair website to connect with relatives, but there are no family trees unless you specifically ask for that via email or messaging service. And yes, you do need to contact the match for that tree information. MyHeritage. So heritage prices have changed up and down in the last couple of years. MyHeritage has basically said that my ethnicity is 93% Eastern European, 7% North and Western European. And although Ancestry DNA, Family Tree DNA, and 23andMe have changed their algorithms for the ethnicity estimate, the ethnicity estimate with MyHeritage hasn't changed in a couple of years. I don't think that that's what they're all about. I think they're more into the connections with families and the genealogical aspects of using DNA to connect with families. So I have a number of people that I have matches with, and what is this? You can add a family tree onto that, as well as import your GEDCOM to that. It is important that if you are interested in value these resources and tools, that you import your GEDCOM on there so that you can work together online with potential matches. Other people don't get access to this, only those people that match you. They have at MyHeritage a chromosome browser as well, auto clusters and ethnicities map. The auto clusters is a tool. It says organizes DNA matches into clusters that likely descend from common ancestors. This is a little bit more difficult and advanced to try to understand. But what it does, it's very similar to PCR results that geneticists do for trying to interpret commonalities between different ethnicities and populations. So they're trying to use a tool very similar to that. And so you'll get blocks of people that are more closely related, and you can check into those people to see how closely related you are to them. As I said, it's a little bit more advanced and more difficult to describe without, we're not going to go into that specifically. The chromosome browser is going to be very similar to what they have at Family Tree DNA. And I think I talked a little bit about that. So I look at it myself and a couple other people, and it shows the 23, or actually, I think my screen ran short on this. There's 23 on there, but I was able to show 20. It shows basically the blocks that I share with different people that I'm trying to match up with. This is a visual representation of that. When you get more involved in the genetic genealogy, you will start comparing multiple people and then seeing where blocks of DNA may have come from a certain line of your ancestors. And then there are, as I said, some people that can basically narrow it down where that block of DNA came from a more cousin or great-great-grandmother or grandfather, because they're following that. Having multiple and numerous people in their family tree doing tests to start teasing out where blocks of DNA came from. That's a very much more advanced feature that you could use in the future if you're so inclined to do so. Provides where matches are coming from. A number of them from the United States, some from Germany, Great Britain, Canada, and they have also from Poland as well that have tested with MyHeritage. So it's not just European matches, but they have matches from all over the world that use MyHeritage as well. Trying to look at a number of people using the Majewski surname, which is Polina Majewska's, my great-grandmother, and trying to find that person on that family tree, which doesn't always get anywhere, but it kind of gives you an idea that you can use surnames to check against their matches to see if they have them within their surname database. They did have a Majewska in their database, and I wanted to find out if they had anybody that was known on their family tree to my Polina Majewska as well, considering that this was in Poland and it wasn't that far from where my grandmother was from as well. This isn't necessarily the best way of doing it, but it allows you to at least check in by surnames to find out if you can locate a common ancestor. MyHeritage allows uploading of DNA, the raw DNA from Ancestry and 23andMe, I believe also from Family Tree DNA. So you can then use that service. If you recall that MyHeritage is a subscription-based service, so it is something that you have to pay for monthly to get full access to all the information. So only tested with 23andMe or Ancestry. Like to have more matches to research. Basically, Family Tree DNA will allow you to upload, and even if you have National Geographic's Geno 2.0, you can use that and upload to their database. It walks you through this and does it semi-automatically for you once you provide the information. It's pretty amazing. The transfer is relatively painless. And once you get on Family Tree's website, you can then have an opportunity to look at the first 20 matches for free and your potentially your ethnicity estimate as well. If you want to do more than that, look at many more matches, there is going to be a small fee for that, not for the transfer, but for the access. So it's something that I recommend, and one of our people that's going to be doing the review, I believe that's as well. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask.
Yes, we do have some questions. A couple of them are real doozies, though. I'm not sure I can even figure them out. We go to Mr. Martin's chromosome description. It says on the chromosome browser tab, only one chromosome is listed with, I assume, 2 people's segment matches highlighted. But each person has 2 copies of each chromosome, so why don't we see that? And are the 2 chromosomes for each person somehow normalized before comparison?
The example that I showed, I'll go back to that.
Yeah.
Further up here. What it is that you can do one person like yourself compared to another person. and that block will be much larger. The more people you add to the comparison, they become a different color and a smaller amount within that, but it is representational of the length, not the thickness, but the length of that part of the chromosome that the block is taking up. I blew up this section so it'd be a lot easier to see what the connection is. They do share DNA and where on the chromosome that DNA is shared. Because we talk about sharing DNA and different blocks, this is a visualization of where those DNA blocks are located. So this person has this block on the same chromosome. So essentially, it's not that they have the other person's block, but essentially that they have their own block, that basically if their own chromosome was pushed up against your chromosome or the other person's chromosome, that these are the lengths that you would see if you compared them side by side.
Okay, here's another one. If there's only a son to trace the Y chromosome, can it be used to trace the Y chromosome, or will he only have his father's Y and not his mother's father?
The son basically will only have his father's Y chromosome and not his mother's father's Y chromosome.
Okay. Let me back up here a bit. Can you build a family tree for free? Doesn't say where they want to build it.
Okay, if you are on a lot of these websites, if you're on, let's say, Family Tree DNA, and you can, if you do not have a family tree already, yes, you can on that website build a family tree on there. It's pretty much dedicated to that website. I'm not sure if you can download that as a GEDCOM, but if you're using a family tree program, then you can download that as a GEDCOM and then upload that to any of the websites you want to add the family tree information. But yes, you can start from scratch. If you've done a DNA test on many of these websites, they allow to do that.
Okay, I've got another one here. It's rather involved. To find which of two brothers, Adam and Adolf, is my maternal great-grandmother's father. 3 of my maternal first cousins match Adolph's descendants at much higher centimorgans than Adam's descendants. Is this likely proof that her father was indeed Adolf? And I left out the centimorgan numbers when I read this.
Are these brothers or cousins?
It says to find which of two brothers.
Brothers, okay.
Are my maternal great-grandmother's father.
Well, see, the problem is we're going on the maternal side now. There has to be, well, you have a centimorgan test. Oh, see, you're using autosomal DNA to try to figure this out. I think you would need to use a Y-DNA test to confirm that. But being brothers, their Y-DNA is going to be almost the same or basically identical. You would not be able to tell from a paternal DNA test, not a paternity set, but a paternal or Y-DNA test, which one was which. The autosomal may provide some indication. You'll need to read off how many centimorgans for each. In the question, it has the number of centimorgans for Adolf and the other one.
Okay, just a second.
I'm sorry. You're probably reading ahead.
No, I've just got another on-site question here. So do you want to stick with this one on the two brothers, or?
Yeah, I just want to know what the centimorgans were.
Okay, 3 of my maternal first cousins match Adolph's descendants at much higher centimorgans, 66 to 135. And on 3 to 5 segments, Adam's descendants are 45 centimorgans and less.
Well, yeah, Adam's got less DNA going through that system, so the one that has the higher one is more likely. But I can tell you what, I'd rather have an email sent to me so I can look at this more carefully.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. So now I have one on site here.
Sure.
Hello. I've learned through religion and a lot of our ancestral genealogical records that we have now kept online that the descendants of my relatives are Orin, also known as Or. One part, dwarves, it's a derivative of dwarves. Where I find this, Orin, is that they were of the dirt and they were commonly known as a slave as N. So they were just dirt, you know, they were gatherers of some sort of ore. They were Orans, okay? When they were relieved of their ancestral duties or their enslavements, one went up northern to the Russian areas, and then the other ones went off to the English and set their ways in Scotland. Now I noticed that in Scotland, they become more tribunal. Up in Russia, they became very, they became Orthodox. The descendants that moved here from Russia, my Orin descendants that moved from Russia, the father, Adolf, he and Alfred, they had a child every 2 years. So there's in 24 months, they would have a child in 19 months. That would give them 4 months to conceive after birth. So then he did it from the age 20 all the way till his like 90th birthday with many women. So, I mean, he just bloomed. It's incredible how many children this guy had. And then I also noticed that in the Irish, or in the Scot-Irish, that the clans people, they may differentiate their last names with one letter, whereas Orun, maybe O-R-R-U-N, would marry an Or, O-R-R. The question with that is, so when the O-R-R moved and married with the O-R-R-U-N, I figured they were the same tribe with a really strong chromatic code. And then the ones from Russia had a really strong chromatic code as well. When they met here in Indiana, which they eventually migrated here in Indiana, the ones from Ireland, the ones from Scotland, and then the ones from Russia, and then their children, if they were to meet, how would that work? Because that was just like super inbreeding. That isn't just like a common chromosome. That's like almost trying to make your chromatic chromosome the same and identical. I don't really understand how that would work.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of diversity when you expand and go into different territories. You're going to start meeting other people from other lineages. That creates a better biological diversity. So I wouldn't worry about that so much as when people get into smaller communities and don't get genetics from outside for a very long time. We're still pretty biologically resilient when it comes to that. It takes a lot to do a bottleneck to cause a lot of problems. But the other thing is that what I would suggest that if you haven't already, do a Y DNA test through Family Tree DNA to look at what genetic group you belong to for your surname. And then those people, those men that have the same surname that would be related to you by your genetic group will be those that would be sharing your common ancestor. There will be some other people that have the same surname that have a different genetic group that are not related and are a different branch from a different line. But I would suggest that you look into that to have a better idea if the Russian and the Irish Orin surnames are indeed the same lineage, but that just split up over time.
Okay, and then even with the Irish being like Orin and Orin marrying Orin, isn't that kind of, you know?
No, it doesn't matter about that. You're going to have similarities in surnames. There are always going to be variations, but what you're going to look at is you're specifically looking at the Y DNA, the Y chromosome, the male chromosome to get an idea. You'll see on the match list those who have the same surname or those who are similar surname, and then the matches that have a totally different surname. So the idea is that you probably have a common ancestor with all those people, but if you're looking to connect the two from Russia and Ireland, you're going to need to see what those results are to make some better judgment calls regarding genetics. Not necessarily about the family tree, but that also may confirm family tree folklore as well.
Oh, okay.
Hang on, I think I have another question here.
Sure.
You got a family tree on MyHeritage, and you got a niece starting. Is there a way to transfer it? It's going to be half of the tree.
If someone has a family tree on MyHeritage that has been started, can that tree be transferred to another site?
You know, most of the time I see that you can import a GEDCOM. I don't recall on MyHeritage where you can take it off, but I don't have a good answer for that because I haven't tried to take the family trees off of the sites as much as I've tried to import them. So if you've built it, and I know you're talking about, there's a number of people that have built, they start a page that basically is their family page and has their family tree on there. That you're going to have to see if there is a menu that shows whether or not you can click on that. If you've looked before and haven't been able to find it, you might not be able to take that off directly.
Okay. All right. Whoops, another question.
Ancestry gives a great big long number for the family tree. When you go into computers, is there a way to go directly to that family tree using that number?
Ancestry will give a large number, a long number for a family tree. Is there a way to go directly to that tree without using that number? Did I say that enough to make sense?
Okay, wait, this is a number that it basically is tied to that tree?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, no, the way it does through Ancestry DNA. Now, if you're asking an ancestry question for family trees, that's outside my realm. But if you're going through Ancestry DNA, the family tree is linked to that person's match that you're matched to. That you can then click on that and whether or not they've made it private or not, because they can privatize that or make it non-accessible or lock it. But if they've unlocked it, then you have access. But that's the only way. And I don't remember, unless you hover over it, it might provide a number on there, but I don't recall at this point whether you go, unless you're in, there's two ways. You can be invited into a family tree, or you look at it from the DNA results as long as they have it unlocked. But actually typing in that would be through Ancestry directly outside of, Ancestry DNA is part of Ancestry, but that would be an Ancestry.com question, which I can't answer.